Konrad's expertise in crafting compelling copy is something that will really transform your e-commerce business.
In order to win market share and share of voice and, convince enough prospects to buy your products in order to have a viable, scalable business, then copywriting is just, in my opinion, even more important perhaps.
Prepare to transform your approach to online communication with your customers on your store.
For people that don't have that sort of copywriting understanding, thinking that they can just put a one sentence or one paragraph prompt into ChatGPT and it can create a homepage.
If you've got more idea of what great copy looks like, then you'll be able to get great copy out of AI.
Makes it much more likely that you're able to kind of nudge them over the edge and do what we want to do as an e-commerce brand, which is essentially sell, right?
Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked podcast. I'm Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Erdley. Now, when we're not recording the podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. Keen to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business? My book, The Home Turf Advantage, is your blueprint for launching a profitable online store. Grab your copy at htabook.com today and let's get you started. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast. Today, we are joined by Konrad Sanders, the man behind the Creative Copywriter, a company that's reshaping how e-commerce brands communicate. This conversation is packed with golden insights for you to consider when crafting your dropshipping business.
Absolutely, Lewis. Konrad isn't just any copywriter. He is a strategist who understands e-commerce and how the right words from your business can dramatically boost online engagement and sales. So in this conversation that we're about to share with you, he's going to unpack the secrets behind compelling copy that not only attracts, but converts.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting conversation because it's not just about what to write necessarily. I know in this interview, Konrad will also dive deep into how emerging AI technologies are influencing copywriting and how you can maintain that essential human touch in your business whilst harnessing AI. So a really valuable insight. Prepare to transform your approach to online communication with your customers on your store as we decode the art and science of copywriting with a real master of the craft. Let's get started.
Today, we're excited to be joined by Konrad Sanders, who is a master of copywriting and the CEO of the Creative Copywriter. So, Konrad, it is fantastic to have you with us on the podcast today. We're going to dive deep into both the art and science of copywriting for e-commerce. So, Konrad, let's kick things off and demystify what is actually copywriting for our audience today. So, in your own words, what is copywriting and why do you think it's so critical for e-commerce businesses in today's digital marketplace?
Great question to kick off with. Thanks for having me, first of all, and for that warm introduction. So copywriting, what is it? What's it all about? In my own words, I'd say that copywriting is as you said, the art and science of crafting the right words for your business in order to essentially compel, convince, and convert your target audience. And at the Creative Copywriter, our agency, we talk about doing so at every step of the customer journey. So it's not just about, that brand messaging on your website. It would be and it's not just about conversion. At some parts of the journey, it's about attracting and engaging with that kind of entertaining and or value-driven content at the top of the funnel. Then it's about nurturing. Then it's about convincing and converting. And then it's about maximizing customer lifetime value as well, which is huge. Why is it important? Well, you've got your target audience out there, right? And in order for them to part with their hard-earned cash, they're not just going to throw their cash around willy-nilly. In order to persuade them to buy your product, you need to, first of all, build trust. You need to remove barriers. So remove perceived barriers. You need to build up the perceived value of your products. to a point that it's at least on par with the value of the money you're asking of them, if not more. And, you need to convince them that your product or products are the exact fit for their needs, that are exactly what they need to solve whatever pain point problem they have, or to kind of marry up with that desire that they have, as opposed to the plethora of other competitor products that are out there. So differentiation is a huge part of copy. So in order to do all of those things I mentioned, build trust, break down barriers, build up the perceived value, convince, convert, you need words, right? Essentially, you can't just do that with nice product photos and imagery, nice design, good UX on a website. Those things are all important, of course, naturally. They all need to sort of work in harmony together and work together. But arguably, and maybe I'm biased, arguably the most important thing to do all of it, achieve all of the goals, all the things I just mentioned, is the words, the way that you're talking about your value proposition and your products, the way that the words you're using and the tone that you're using to do so. So that's copywriting, and why is it important? And to sort of speak specifically to the e-commerce world, I'd say that, we were talking, even before COVID, we were talking about the death of the high street and the fact that more and more retail companies and brands were kind of having to focus on digital and sell more. Your target audience's attention is finite, and your budget is finite, your marketing budget is finite, and in order to win market share and share a voice and convince enough prospects to buy your products in order to have a viable, scalable business, then copywriting is just, in my opinion, even more important perhaps than before, to differentiate you from the masses and do all of the things that I mentioned.
Well, it's a key touch point for how our business interacts with our customers. As you say, potentially the most important, as well as the user design, the actual words that people are reading is key for them to feel like they are having their pains met by that company and the products that they're purchasing. Now, to go into actually the practical, where we use copywriting for e-commerce, I guess the website is potentially the front line of an e-commerce business and the copywriting that we create. So specifically thinking about a website now and making sure that we're managing and talking to those pain points that you've discussed, what are some of the best practices for us to consider when writing the copy for our e-commerce websites?
Yeah, great question. There's so many things I could say, so many answers I could give, but let me delve into some of the main ones, let's say. And probably while we're talking about website copy here, because that's the question, a lot of these will probably apply to other touch points as well. But let's start with kind of perhaps the first lesson in the copywriting handbook, if there were such a thing, is focusing on benefits over features. We often say, in my opinion, it should be benefits married to features. You shouldn't just write about benefits. You should write about features. So those, specifications of your product, they're kind of important, but what does that mean? What does that specific feature mean in terms of, how is it going to improve the life of your target customer? So whenever you list out the features of the product that you're selling or products, just ask this question, why should they give a crap? Why is that important to them? And that why question is a really nice way to lead you to that end benefit. And that's really what's going to motivate people, that benefit. So we like to say, sell a good night's sleep, not the mattress, and other similar examples. So benefits over features, that's an important one. Choppy copy. So I might be alluding to, as I give you my answers today, James, I might be alluding to lenses. And as you know, we have a framework at my agency, the Creative Copywriter, called the 13 lenses. I won't have time to talk about all of them, but in case I start mentioning the word lens, that's the reason why. So we've got one lens called the goldfish lens, and it's all about essentially thinking about your prospects as though they have the attention span of a goldfish, because attention spans are dwindling, right? They're online, especially. People have 10, 20 tabs open at any one time, a million things on their to-do list, and their attention is kind of jumping about between various tasks and things and websites. So there are certain things that companies can do to make the copy digestible in the first place, and certain things you can do to do the opposite of that. So, chunky paragraphs, for example, are just hard for the eye to follow and read, right? So it can put a bit of strain on the eye, and that's a good reason for your target prospect just to go, screw it, I can't be bothered to read that copy. And you might have the best, amazing, benefit-led copy in there, but a big chunky paragraph should be broken down. That's a simple trick. Long sentences are also just harder to digest, so chop them in half. Put full stops in. A full stop is a copywriter's best friend. It's very easy to, when you have a long sentence, just to think about, okay, whacking a full stop in there to make it choppy, easier to digest. Another tip, again, which would be especially for your website, but really for pretty much all copy and at every touch point, is to make it conversational. So again, back to this copywriter's handbook, that would be right up there. We've got one of our lenses is the Real Talk lens, and that's all about conversational copy. And even if you look back at the old school copywriting newspaper ads of 100 years ago, the ones that did really well, they're extremely conversational. But by that, I mean, the way you write should be the way you speak. So a litmus test is, do you speak like that at home? Or do you speak like that down the pub? If not, it's probably not conversational enough. And just to be specific there, to give some specific tips as to how to make it more conversational, use the words you and your, right? Rather than talking in the third person. Ask questions. Questions are great. So you can often look at some copy that doesn't include any questions and go, oh, how can I turn that sentence into a question? Because it involves the reader, right? And the more the reader feels like they're sitting down and having a conversation with one person, the more likely they are to, be convinced and to convert, essentially.
I'll come in on that point there, Konrad, and the conversational one is an interesting one because it's not initially what I'd think. I think the benefits over features, choppy copy makes sense with the attention spans dwindling. The conversational one's interesting because I guess it implies that we don't want to become this like authority, and sometimes we've got this feeling of like we've got to speak up as like an authority, large brand, and not a conversational person to person. But is it all because the goal of it is to make that customer that's reading feel involved and spoken to?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly because as a brand, for me, a big part of branding, which is we obviously get heavily involved in as a copywriting agency, is personification, right? If you think about some of the things that you achieve when going through a brand strategy process, it's identifying your values, identifying your personality traits, identifying your voice, right? Those are all human qualities. And there's a reason for it because, a bit of a cliche here, people buy from people in the end of the day, and we are social creatures naturally. So if we're reading something and it feels like a conversation and it feels like a human in a sense, obviously a brand, but there's some kind of personality there. There's a voice, and that's why we talk about tone of voice. We as social creatures are just much more likely to be engaged, to kind of get hooked in the first place. Our brains are just wired that way. And then, as you said, like to feel like we're having a conversation in our mind. So it just creates a sense of closeness. It connects the two, the prospects, the reader and the brand in a way that, again, just makes it much more likely that you're able to kind of nudge them over the edge and do what we want to do as an e-commerce brand, which is essentially sell, right? Convert and sell and drive revenue and be successful and grow our business.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. I think sometimes because we're not building personal brands and we're building e-commerce brands selling physical products, it's easy to detach yourself from that brand or at least not make it personal because you're seeing it as a separate entity. But that is an interesting perspective, thinking about the brand that you're creating as a kind of, have personal traits and how that brand would talk. And yeah, I think that would bring out a lot of better copy in people if you started to assign a voice to the brand. Would you say that's like a foundational piece for copywriting, is understanding what your voice is initially?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you were to work with us, for example, or, when we work with clients, one of the first things I do in our sort of discovery calls is to understand whether that brand has gone through the process, the brand strategy, we call it brand DNA process, and carved out a tone of voice as well as values and personality. Obviously, when we're working with bigger brands like Adidas, for example, that's all been done, right? And they have, in-house teams working on it, brand positioning agencies, etc. So we have a brand exploration sheet that we would always ask them to fill out as their first port of call when we're going through the onboarding process. And within that, we ask them questions about, describe your tone of voice, give 4 or 5 adjectives. Here's a tone of voice axis. So from, formal to casual, mark an X on it. From sort of humorous to not humorous, like mark an X on that axis. And they should have all that information. Whereas if you're a younger e-commerce brand, let's say, then yeah, we would always push our clients at least towards going through that process before writing their copy. Because otherwise you're sort of, I wouldn't say you're not necessarily shooting in the dark, but you're missing a trick. You're missing a trick. And, brand voice, a big part of it is about differentiation, as I said, which I think is key, and about that connection and building trust and all the things that we want to achieve. So I would say it's a core element. You can write just sort of conversion copy and use all our other lenses, for example, but one of our lenses of our 13 is the brand lens, because we think it's sort of imperative that you have that sort of figured out, and that when we're writing copy, or when you're writing copy, you're making sure that, every sentence, every paragraph, every page is in tune with that core brand identity and that tone of voice.
Yeah, it's a foundational piece. And it's interesting to see then how we can put that voice into a website to really bring that website to life and start speaking as your brand and to your customers directly to address the pain points and give them the benefits that they're looking for. I'm interested because you mentioned that it is an art and a science. And part of the science is, of course, to convert people. But we're also, before that stage on a website, trying to compel people to continue on the website and stay with you and consider adding to cart and going through that process. So going back to the website copy that we're creating, how does the copy differ on different pages? So like a home page compared to a product page, how would you differ the type of copy that you write?
Great question. I think that, first of all, while we want to focus on how it differs, I'd like to say, first of all, that you want to make sure there's consistency throughout those pages and a flow. So while each page type kind of plays a role, and usually kind of a slightly different role, the first thing to do when sort of mapping out your website, like building an information architecture, we call it an IA, kind of the thinking before the writing, is to, make sure that you're looking at that flow and thinking about how a visitor would flow from page to page, where you want to move them to and why. And back to tone of voice, there should be consistency in voice across those pages. But saying that, I guess we can dive into some specific pages. So should we start with the home page?
Yeah, as if we're a customer, I guess.
There you go, your shop window. I'd say that the home page is an interesting one, an important piece of the puzzle. First of all, it's usually the page that most traffic is driven to, other than, let's say, specific landing pages for kind of PPC traffic. and we can go into those in a moment. But as your shop window, and as that often it's the first touch point, or maybe not the first, but they've been driven by an ad or some kind of piece of content. It's perhaps the first touch point where you're there to kind of really sell yourself, let's say. The first thing to think about is the kind of real estate at the top of the screen, above the fold, which is a bit of an old school term, but it's still important. It's that bit that the visitor will see when they land on your site. And we like to say in copywriting that you've got around 6 seconds to grip your visitor. It's kind of the make or break moment. And you can look at sort of stats again, back to like, I obviously like the history of copywriting, an old school newspaper ad. It's very similar when looking at a headline of an old newspaper kind of article. That's the most important part, that first, essentially value proposition headline that you want to weave into your homepage. And I say value proposition, I should add the word unique. Really what we're trying to achieve there is to take your unique value proposition and express it in a few sentences. An instant clarity headline. So clarity is key, right? You don't want to get so creative that in those 6 seconds, your visitor doesn't know what it is you sell, what's the value you can offer them, why they're there, should they continue reading. And then usually like a subheader or a little paragraph there, which kind of reinforces some of those USPs and gives you a bit more copy to kind of to reinforce that. So that's kind of a key ingredient in a homepage, is making sure that you grip them in the first place with that instant clarity header and subheader. Then a lot of the rest of your homepage it is dedicated to often kind of teasing other areas of the site, because naturally they can go into more detail on other pages. So usually it's subheaders, paragraphs that will tease the about page, that will tease like the product pages. And what I'd say that's really important also for a homepage, and I say again, this is very important for specific landing pages, is that your subheaders shouldn't just tease the paragraph underneath them, right? That's very common for brands to kind of say, why us, or our products, and then there's a paragraph there. The reason why you need to do more than that is because lots of people skim and scan. A very common way for people to sort of engage with a website is by skimming and scanning. And it's a very common mistake for marketers and even copywriters to kind of assume that they're reading every single word because you've poured your heart into it. You've written all these words, so surely they're going to be reading every word in the exact order that you want them to. The reality is they don't. They kind of land on a website. As I said, they've got 20 other tabs open and they often whip through it. So a great tip is to make sure on your homepage, your subheaders, within 5 seconds of skimming down that page, your subheaders kind of tell the story and express your USPs or unique selling points just by themselves, without them having to read that body copy within each section. So again, a homepage has to do so much because you kind of want, in 5-10 seconds, if someone just reading, the main header and subheader, then whipping through the subheaders to get a feel, to get a gist for what it is you can do for them, why you're different, what's the unique value you can provide to them, and how can you kind of change their life for the better, in a sense. And then, beyond that, you want to kind of tease these other pages and try to nudge them to sort of navigate the site and go to the different areas where you want them to go, and where it would help to, build that trust that we mentioned and build on it to a point whereby, they feel like you've knocked down the barriers that they had, those like objections, you've built up that value, you've built that trust, and it's kind of a no-brainer for them to kind of part with that hard-earned cash and buy your product or products.
I love that idea of teasing the next step. And it's like you're not trying to sell the product at that point or even tell your whole story on the homepage. It's about getting people to engage more with your brand, to start searching around. And I love the idea of teasing a quick point while we're on the subject of the homepage still is creating that unique value proposition. So to give you some context for the type of businesses that we run, we'll enter a niche or an industry that we can tell there are products that we want to enter that are selling already. And when we're early stage in this building an e-commerce business, we might not be 100% sure on what our unique value proposition is, or even what our value proposition is as a business at the very early stage. So how would you go about kind of getting really clear and condensing that right down to a sentence and a subheading? How can you really condense and understand what it is you can offer to your customers?
You're giving me good questions today. I'd say that like when it comes to the value proposition or UVP, unique value proposition, as you've sort of mentioned there, the first step is the thinking, right? The strategy, the strategic side of things, prior to actually kind of bringing that to life with copy. And again, for me, that fits into the sort of brand strategy box, right? That stage, which for us, as I said, is like probably an essential ingredient or essential step prior to kind of bringing it to life. And for us, when it comes to value propositions and unique value propositions, there's an element of having to do competitor analysis, right? Because the likelihood is that you have maybe a brilliant product or products, and maybe they are unique, and I'm sure there's something unique about them. But what is that? How can you figure that out when the likelihood is that there are probably lots of other competitors who are offering similar products, if not, very, very similar. So you need to do competitor analysis to kind of zig while the industry zags, to kind of help you understand what is unique about what you're offering, and then create a value proposition statement. So it's more of a sort of internal document. There are various formulas. We have one. I'm sure you guys have one, where you're kind of breaking down, who's your target audience, what it is you're offering them, what are your differentiators, what does that mean for them, something like that, following a formula. And that might be a bit of a longer statement that's more sort of internal, that you use to drive all of your marketing efforts. And then what we have to do as copywriters, kind of the hard task of distilling that down into even fewer words. And again, an instant clarity header, on a homepage is one of the toughest kind of nuts to crack, so to speak, because much like taglines, right, where sometimes brands come to us and just think, they misunderstand how difficult it is to write a great tagline when you've got 3 to 5 words to really embody, the essence of that brand. When you've got fewer words, it actually takes longer sometimes because it's more difficult. How do we do it? I guess it's just drilling down into, like, as I said, the essence of that value proposition statement. Like, what are the things that jump out? What are those core elements, those core words? And also we follow formulas as well. When it comes to writing headlines for a homepage, there's all kinds of formulas out there that are proven to work. So back to the art and the science, naturally we want to be creative, and but at the same time, there are proven formulas and frameworks that work. So we would usually, if we're writing copy for a client, for example, we'd usually give them a few options for different headlines that maybe take a slightly different approach, but all of which try to embody that value proposition into sort of one sentence and then a subheader or a sort of a mini paragraph after that.
Fantastic. That's the key, isn't it? Trying to distill something down into a punchy 5 or 6 word statement that differentiates you and immediately tells your customers what they're going to get from working with you is the key to it all. And I agree. Making something shorter, although it's less words, takes longer than being less concise. So taking that then to the product page, how about a few best practices for actually the copy that we put on the product page?
Product pages, I think, very commonly focus too much, as I said earlier, on features, those specifications, and just that. I think there's a missed opportunity to inject those benefits in, B, to inject creativity and personality. Even with some brands, some e-commerce brands, you'll find that personality, that tone of voice is kind of there in the homepage, in the about page. But then when it comes to the product, it's like, oh, we don't need that. Here, let's just show the product. So there's an opportunity to kind of weave that consistent tone of voice into the product pages as well. Something that is very, very powerful. So if this might be my tip of the day, potentially, we call it voice of customer data, so VOC data, so voice of customer language. This is very powerful. Well, let me explain what it is first of all. By that, I mean the way that your customers are describing your product and describing their pain points and describing their desires and describing how that product changed their life, etc. That is a brilliant thing to gather and to weave into your product pages. So an easy way to do it when you're an e-commerce brand, and we often do this for clients, is go, if you're selling via Amazon, etc., there's loads of comments there. There's all that feedback. That's a gold mine of voice of customer language that you can go through. And there are two things we usually look for. On the one hand, it's when a word or a phrase has been used commonly, right? Because then there's something there. It's like, oh, okay, that's the word they're using to describe the product or the pain point or the brand. Because if it's 60% or 50% of people are kind of using that word or similar word, then it would be a great idea to weave that into your product page copy. Also, sometimes you just find a quote that's been so emotively written and beautifully written that as a copywriter, you don't even want to touch it. That can become your product page headline. It's like, wow, that came from the heart, right? We as copywriters are trying to express things in a way that will really resonate with the emotions of our target audience. And what could be better than if it's just come from the horse's mouth, so to speak, And occasionally you'll just find this amazing emotive language and you can weave it in. And in order to also create social proof, which is something that we definitely should talk about, you can create instant social proof by actually just putting it in quotation marks. So that's another little tip. Your product page should have a header as well. Again, there's a missed opportunity if you just write the product name, right? Have something more exciting. Use those copywriting techniques that we're talking about today. And potentially it could literally be a quote that you've pulled out of a customer review. And by putting in quotation marks, people instantly know that that's not come from you. It's not how you're describing your product. It's how someone like them, another customer, is describing their product. And that's my third point for product pages, other than weaving in voice of customer language and words and phrases, etc. Social proof is absolutely crucial. Not just for your product page. It should be, weave it into every page, but possibly more so on that product page where you're really trying to nudge them to purchase a particular product. People, back to trust. We talked about trust at the beginning. It's one of the first things we talked about. People are more likely to trust other customers, other people like them, than they are the brand. Because naturally a brand is going to be saying that their products are great and are the perfect fit for your needs, right? That's what we're going to be doing. We're as a sales and marketing team, that's kind of our job, is to say how great our products are. And you can do it in clever ways, but one of the smartest things you can do is create that social proof by having, customer quotes, feedback, how many stars did it get in wherever, Google, etc. And just litter it with testimonials, essentially. And like I said, they can even be woven into the copy itself.
Brilliant. Yeah, just a few speech marks in there, get the customer's voice across. And as you say, the customers understand that the brand have got a bit of a vested interest in saying that the products are amazing. So then they're lucky to see, okay, but I won't just take your word for it. I'll take the word of it from customers and people that have already purchased. And it just reduces the risk from that customer to buy if they know what another customer has already experienced and said. So yeah, I love that point that you mentioned there. Something else I want to touch on with this episode is the hot topic at the moment, and it's the AI influence. And I wonder how AI has influenced how you work with your copywriting agency, and how you can actually do copywriting potentially with AI without losing that personal touch that we've talked about is so crucial for your brand identity.
Yeah, I've got lots of things to say about this, as you can imagine. The first thing to say is that for us as an agency, we've very much embraced the technology. We've very much embraced AI. We kind of had our eye on the developments in large language models, years ago, because there were tools that were coming out prior to ChatGPT, which was free and kind of blew up the internet. And naturally, as a forward-thinking agency, wanting to future-proof our agency, we've had to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of those developments in generative AI. When ChatGPT came along, we kind of sped that process up in a sense, and we thought it was important for us to kind of carve out our perspective on it, on the future of copywriting. What does it mean now that you can kind of prompt a chatbot to essentially create copy for you? And B, to go through a very thorough use case testing process, which we've been doing for over a year. Made sure we carved out hours for our writers and team to kind of use case test this technology and see where are the strengths, where are the limitations. And again, I don't know how much detail to go into, but we created a big spreadsheet. We basically broke down all the things we deliver, from homepage to blog post to a buyer interview to and everything in between, and broke it down into what are the steps to kind of deliver each of those assets. And then we scored them in a certain scoring matrix, and that was the basis for our use case testing. So all of that being said, the reason why I'm mentioning it is so that you understand, I think, hopefully, that when I talk about my perspective on AI and copywriting, it comes from a place of understanding and research. So back to your actual question. We believe that the now and future of copywriting is collaborative, right? Humans and machines. We don't believe, at least currently, and for the foreseeable future, or at least the next 5 years, let's say, you can just prompt generative AI to create copy that is good enough for you, that is great, good, strong, copy that ticks all the boxes that we need to tick. And especially one thing that we're seeing is the mistake of non-copywriters trying to just create copy, or people that don't have that sort of copywriting understanding, thinking that they can just put a one sentence or one paragraph prompt into ChatGPT and it can create a homepage or a landing page or even blog posts and the kind of long form content. The problem with that is that, and someone put this, I thought, quite well on LinkedIn in a comment on one of my posts. They said the best way to write great copy with AI is by being a great copywriter. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. And the reason I say that is because, again, it's a tool, right? And you have to have that understanding of what the output should look like. And generative AI, the way it works is it's essentially a predictive model, right? So it picks the next word in the sentence based on what's most likely to come next, with some variability in there, so that it doesn't just, it's not creating exactly duplicate content all the time. And the reason I say that is that it's prone to kind of copywriting cliches, it's prone to creating cliches. And that's something we want to avoid. So back to the copywriting handbook and, or best practices for copywriting, you want to avoid cliches. The kind of thing like, oh, you found the right place. That's the kind of thing you've seen on a million websites because they're overused, right? At some point, it was probably a good conversational sentence. It was good copy, right? But then it gets used by so many brands across so many industries that it becomes a copywriting cliche. And when at the reader, their eyes kind of glaze over. It doesn't give that differentiation we're talking about, that unique brand personality. So that was my warning. My warning is that, you can't just prompt AI to create great copy. You might think I would say that, but I genuinely believe it. If I didn't believe it, I'd probably be pivoting my agency right now. If I thought you could, we would make some more, some bigger moves. However, it is great. It's a great tool. It's a brilliant tool. And we are, as I said, we've identified a lot of use cases where it's really helping us. The areas that it really helps are, first of all, transcription. So, we use Fireflies, and there's multiple other tools out there whereby one of the things we do as copywriters is talk to the customers of our clients, right? Buyer interviews, I mentioned it before. It's a great way to get that voice of customer that we mentioned, and to really understand the pain points that we talked about and the desires that we talked about. When we talk to customers, we record those calls, and AI is brilliant at transcribing, and then you can use it to kind of pick things out. So if you're using ChatGPT, we've built a bot, a GPT. So we've built a number of bots that serve different functions within the agency. And one of them is doing kind of recaps. So, you can essentially transcribe, and then you can ask it questions like, oh, tell me the pain points, pull out the pain points, or tell me the desires. It can also do that for surveys. If you do a survey and you get lots of results back, or you do some social listening, again, it can work a lot faster than humans can. So it can pull out those words and phrases that I mentioned are a very clever thing to weave into your product pages. It's brilliant for research as well. So just, if you want to get a better understanding, in our case, of different industries, it can kind of summarize things well and just feed you with knowledge and intel. And if you're, working for your own, whether you're running your own, e-commerce business or you're in the marketing team, it's kind of good for stress testing things as well. So asking it questions like, again, like what would be the pain points of this specific segment that you're going after, this particular audience? What would be the desires? It's got a wealth of knowledge, right? It's billions of data points, so it can kind of feed you with things that you don't know or you're unsure about. In terms of the creation part, I'd say it's great as a sparring partner. So our copywriters use it for, and me personally, to be honest, like one thing I didn't mention, a little extra tip for you, metaphors and analogies and similes are great. Good copywriting practice is to weave those in, because it's just a creative way to bring certain aspects and features alive. It's kind of like mini stories in a sentence. And sometimes, this is probably me being too honest here, sometimes, because I'm not writing copy as much as I used to, essentially I'm the CEO. I do write LinkedIn posts though. That's when I kind of have to get creative. And sometimes I kind of get stuck I know I want to work a simile or a metaphor into my post, and my brain gets a bit stuck. So I use ChatGPT as a sparring partner, drop it in there and say, can you turn this point into a metaphor? Give me some options. Give me 5-10 options. And our copywriters will maybe, start with a headline and get ChatGPT to kind of churn out various different headlines. And often, like, some of them will be crappy, right? Maybe even most of them, but you can pick some out that are good, or it's food for thought. It will lead you in a certain direction. So I think it's great as a transcriber, as a research partner, as a sparring partner, and to sometimes stress test your decisions as well, and potentially also as a planner of copy and content as well. I talked before about information architecture, the thinking before the writing. Before you just write a homepage, what's the message hierarchy? What goes first? What goes next? Before you write a blog post, what's that kind of structure to the post? AI can kind of really help there too. But again, be warned that it's usually going to go for the most obvious thing, the most done thing, the most cliched thing, whether that's, the topic or the actual copy itself. So that's why we think don't abuse it, right? Use it, don't abuse it. Don't rely on it too much. And back to my main point, which is I think it's a collaboration, human and machines. And my main tip for AI is to have ChatGPT open. Don't stick your head in the sand. Embrace the technology and play with it and test it for yourself. Because while we've got company-wide processes, one of the main conclusions we came to after doing this big use case testing project was that everyone uses it in a different way. Each of our copywriters have their own individual ways of writing a headline and coming up with a structure for a page and writing that copy. And each of them use our bots that we've created, our GPTs, in different ways. And I think the crucial thing is to have patience as well. Don't shut things down and go, oh, I tried it and the output was rubbish. It's rubbish. You have to have patience and learn how to prompt and learn how to re-prompt and get it to where you want it to get to. And I think this is crucial beyond just copywriting. This is like learning how to use search, right? My mum doesn't know how to search for things on Google because she's rubbish with technology, and she has to call me up because she's not been able to find a website, right? She can't really email either. We're telling people, everyone really, you should get used to this technology because this is the future. And you could end up like my mum if you just kind of shove it aside and go, nah, it's rubbish, it didn't work for me.
Yeah, and you potentially push away the opportunities that it can bring. So yeah, I like the hybrid copywriter, if you will, sort of AI. But the key with it being hybrid is that if you've got more idea of what great copy looks like, then you'll be able to get great copy out of AI. Whereas if you're going with a hybrid model and you don't know what great copy looks like, then that equally the balance is there then for the ChatGPT isn't going to be able to produce as great copy. Was it that a decent summary, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, definitely. And we're even seeing that there are quite big brands. We work with a lot of global companies that are starting to come to us more. I feel like the demand for human copywriting is on the rise again. And having conversations with them is often because, I've got several companies I've spoken to recently where they've dabbled in it, they've tried it, but the person within the company pushing content creation and copy creation with AI is not a copywriter or even a marketer sometimes. They're like a growth hacker, and they're like, oh, we can use this. And the output's been so bad that the marketing team have gone, oh, wow, we need to go back and find a creative copywriting team. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be bad. It's just you need the right people using it and have that right understanding of where you need to get it to. And that's why we've really embraced it and believe that we're kind of practicing what we preach in terms of this hybrid approach to copywriting.
Fascinating. Brilliant. I'm really glad we touched on that. And there's been so many top tips inside this podcast, Konrad. I've learned so much just listening to you, and I'm sure we could speak about this for hours. And I know we will go on to do another recording now for for some members as well. So just to close out, it's something you've highlighted, and I think will be of interest of people listening today, is the 13 lenses framework. I guess, is that how you view any copy that you create? And is there a way that people can access the 13 lenses framework?
There is a way, James. So thanks for the plug. Yeah, 13 lenses in a nutshell is kind of 13 different core ingredients that we've identified as, the ingredients you need to write copy and content that does what you want it to do: compel, convince, and convert. I've touched on some of them: the Real Talk lens, the Goldfish lens, the brand lens. There's an SEO lens, Creative Spark lens, 13. Don't have time to dive into all of them now. But what it is for us as an agency is it's not just something that we train our copywriters on and bake into every brief. We've actually turned it into basically a scoring matrix, or a less fancy way of saying that is a checklist. So that when we're writing copy for our clients, we have one copywriter writing the first draft. It moves over to a QA copywriter that can essentially whip through this checklist. We're aiming to get to 100% in terms of ticking every box, or as close to it as possible. So how can your listeners access the 13 lenses? We do have an e-guide that delves into it and talks about each lens in detail and kind of the things that you should be thinking about. Whether you want to turn that into a scoring checklist, that's up to you, but at least it's there for consideration, right? And whenever you're reviewing copy, analyzing and optimizing your copy and content, wherever it may be, these are the kinds of core areas that you should be reviewing and getting the balance right. And balance is a very important word there, because you don't want to write copy that's so SEO focused that you forgot about the humans that are reading it, or that's so kind of brand focused that you've forgotten about the sales psychology and conversion copywriting techniques, because it's all storytelling, right? So it's about getting balance right. So yes, we have an e-guide, and I believe you'll be dropping a link somewhere in the show notes.
Yeah, that will be the link very high up in the show notes in the description for people to get hold of that 30 Lenses e-guide, because I think it is a fantastic starting position to put into practice everything we've talked about today.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thanks you very much, Konrad, for joining us. I also know that you're starting a podcast for yourself. So for people that have enjoyed this conversation, want to learn more about optimizing the copy as well, then you can check out Konrad's podcast. Have you got the name sorted for that new podcast?
We do, yeah. And thanks for the other plug there. It's called Funnel Visionaries, Real Talk on Perfecting the Customer Journey. So we'll very much be obviously looking at copy, but also delving into content strategy and how to map that out in the different areas of the funnel, obviously through a sort of content and copy lens. So yeah, the first recording is coming up this week, as I said, and hopefully we'll have that all up and open and ready for your ears and eyes very soon. But another great place to sort of connect with me and follow my content and the things I like to talk about is on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and I, give value there, I hope. Copywriting tips, content strategy tips, and also just talk about my story and agency journey, which hopefully you'll find interesting as well.
100%. Fantastic. Thanks again, Konrad, for joining us. Definitely want to be checking out that podcast as well as LinkedIn. I'm already connected with you and would recommend for everyone else. So thank you, Konrad, for joining us on today's episode.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
What a fantastic session that was with Konrad there. His insights into copywriting really shine a light on how critical it is for your success. Especially interesting was hearing about his 13 lenses framework, which I know is going to be incredibly valuable for you when you analyze and improve the text on your website and elsewhere.
It definitely will be. I know Konrad's expertise in crafting compelling copy is something that will really transform your e-commerce business if you apply the lessons from today's episode into your own store, drawing your customers in with better copy, guiding them through the journey that eventually ends in conversions on your store. That's the name of the game. His tips on finding your brand voice I thought were really helpful, and best practices for every page of your site that can really make a real difference. It's about speaking directly to your audience in a way that resonates with them. I particularly enjoyed Konrad's approach to using AI in copywriting, not necessarily to replace humans, but just to better enhance how you can create more meaningful connections with your customers.
Some really important insights that Konrad made today. And if you are looking to elevate your brand, I know that applying Konrad's copywriting strategies is a must. His methods are not just about writing better, as we discussed. It's more about thinking deeper about your customer's psychology and understanding why they would buy and why they want to buy particularly from you. So the conversation and also the following members training that we put together afterwards, it's all really laid out a roadmap for immediate implementation. And I think it's actually quite rare, I'd say, Lewis, to get such a clear and actionable plan.
Yeah, it's rare to find something that's so actionable that you can apply today and start earning more money in your business than you were yesterday. Now, if you're listening to this and you're serious about stepping up your e-commerce business, taking a deep dive into the art and science of copywriting with Konrad's insights is a great start. And remember, great copywriting is just one piece of the puzzle. For a holistic approach to e-commerce success, my book, The Home Turf Advantage, covers everything you need, from how to select which products to sell, how to make consistent sales with paid ads profitably, and even how to leverage copy for maximum impact. Head over to htabook.com to pick up your copy today. Implement Konrad's strategies, follow the framework in the book, and watch your business grow. It's time to turn those words into action and sales.
Enjoying the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a review, and we might just feature it on an upcoming episode. Also, for detailed show notes and resources, head to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast.
If you found value from any episode of this podcast, please take just 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps us more than you could imagine, and who knows, you might just hear your comments on the show. Thanks for being part of our community. Your support helps us keep delivering a new episode every week.
Now it's time to answer a question that we've had in from a listener of the podcast. So thank you for your question. And remember, if you have a question and you want it answered on the podcast, all you need to do is leave a comment beneath the YouTube video version of this episode. And that's exactly what Furhat has done. And he has asked, I am just wondering if these suppliers sell you products one by one, or would they want to buy in bulk? Also, how are you going to negotiate pricing?
Thanks for your question. And yeah, it's a really good one. So we specifically target suppliers who are already comfortable with the dropshipping model. So what this does is ensures that they're open to fulfilling orders one at a time, even before we talk to them. So we're not convincing them that they should move from a different model of dispatching orders in bulk to now supplying us one product at a time. We know from our validation steps that we do in week 2 of our masterclass program that these suppliers are already doing this. So we're not asking them to reinvent their processes. This alignment is crucial for the smooth operation of our business because you wouldn't want to be buying in bulk with this model. Now, sometimes you might approach a supplier who maybe isn't yet doing this. And if there is any hesitation from suppliers about the whole one at a time ordering process, we just make sure that we really emphasize the benefits of that model to them by freeing up that money that we don't then have to invest in huge amounts of stock. Means that we can invest more in advertising, which then leads to a quicker and potentially larger volume of sales for them, which is what they want. And then in turn, that benefits both parties in the long run, us and them. Regarding your second part of the question about pricing negotiations, start negotiations by just asking suppliers for their price list. They'll usually have a price list of trade prices, which is what they sell the products to retailers such as yourself for. We would aim for a reasonable margin of around 30% for a starting margin. Any lower than that, and it can become quite difficult, and margins can get squeezed when you start paying for ads as well. If their initial offer doesn't meet our target, then we'll use their price list as a starting point for negotiations. Maybe we'll keep ad spend low on that brand to ensure that we are profitable for the sales that we do make. And as we start to prove ourselves, we can negotiate better margins with suppliers, try and get them above that 30% profit margin mark, and really eventually aim to reach a mutually beneficial agreement with them.
Perfect. Thank you, Lewis, and thank you for your question. It's now time to highlight a recent review that we've had for the podcast as well. And a big thank you to Ian McGillivray for the YouTube comment. And Ian is also very special to the podcast because he actually won the store that we built and Lewis built in a recent YouTube series that we've released on YouTube, where Lewis did the step-by-step guide of building a brand new dropshipping business. And Ian was the lucky winner of that competition. So Ian has left a YouTube comment. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. So Ian said, honestly, I'm lacking the appropriate superlatives. This series of videos is truly exceptional.
Thank you so much for your review, Ian. And again, congratulations on winning the store. Thanks for entering that competition. Well deserved. As we wrap up for today, one question I have for you is, who do you know that could benefit from hearing this message? Open up your phone right now on this podcast, tap the share button and send them a link to this episode on WhatsApp today and just put a message with it that says, thought you might enjoy this. That tiny gesture could be the thing that changes the direction of their life for the better.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you're walking away with insights and inspiration.
To kickstart your e-commerce journey, grab a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, at htabook.com. It's a distilled guide based on real experience to help you build your e-commerce venture.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more strategies and success stories. And if you like what you heard, a 5-star review would mean the world to us, and you might just get a shout out on an upcoming episode.
And finally, thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We can't wait to bring you more insights on the next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.